Well, good morning, YouTube friends and family, and welcome to today's edition of the Wellness Homesteader. So, canning season is upon us. Are you ready? So, whether this is your first time canning or, like me, your 40th time, stay tuned for some quick tips and tricks on being prepared for the onslaught of fresh vegetables and fruit ready for canning. So I've been doing some planning on some of the upcoming videos for my channel, and I think I'm going to do a short series, little information bites for you to help you get ready and get through canning season. So when you're overwhelmed with your refrigerator full, your countertops full, things needed to be harvested, things in your root cellar, whatever your storage situation is, how can you best be prepared? So today we're going to focus on 6 ways you can plan and be ready for canning season. So tip number 1, check your canners. So of course there's 2 types of canners. There's water bath and then there's pressure canning. So let's talk about water bath first. So I have both the stovetop typical canner that you can buy at any Walmart, almost any Farm and Fleet type store. So you want to make sure a little bit of rust is okay. You're going to have some hard water, calcium deposits. That's fine because that water is not going to touch your food. What is not okay is has your pot rusted to the degree that it's in danger of popping through, and then once you get it all loaded, it will just leak everywhere and your jars could explode or break, causing loss of product. Also check the side handles. If you lift your canner, you want to make sure that the whole bottom doesn't fall out because it's weakened from rust. I've never seen a water bath canner that doesn't rust. There probably is some, but I've not come across them. Also, your rack that goes inside your stovetop water bath canner, you want to make sure that it's intact. It's not going to break when you try to lift your jars in or out. So for the Ball electric canner, which I'm sure many of you have as well, you want to just check and make sure all the things. Now, I don't find that it rusts or gets water deposits like the stovetop version, but check it. Make sure it's working. Make sure your extension, well, not the extension cord, the power cord is intact. It's not frayed, and that it's ready to be used. For pressure canners, guys, I know we all have a variety of canners. I have 3 different brands of canners, pressure canners. So I have an All-American, I have a Presto non-gauged canner, and then I have a Tefal gauged canner. So I cannot cover all the things that you need to do for your specific canner. But what I can tell you is if you go to YouTube, search for your manufacturer of canner, there are always great tips and tricks on what you need to do to be ready. Things like if your canner has the rubber seal, All-American does not, but most canners do. Is the seal intact? Has it deteriorated? Is it warped? Does it need replaced? And if you need to replace it, guys, my suggestion, order 2 so you always have 1 spare in case you have a seal failure right in the middle of canning season. Usually a seal will last about 2 to 3 years. Also, if you're using a gauged pressure canner, the All-American is exception to this. It does not need to be calibrated or tested. You need to take that to your local county extension office and have that gauge tested. It's so important, guys. I know it's a pain. It is a pain. Sometimes they're behind and you're kind of pressured, but if your canner is not reaching proper pressure, you do run the risk of getting botulism, contamination in your food. And we don't want to kill our families with our pressure canning, right? So if you don't know how to get a hold of your local county extension office, Google your county. So if your county is Kimberly County, Ohio, Kimberly County, Ohio County Extension Office, and it will pop right up. If Most of them you can't make appointments online. At least that's been my experience. You do need to call them, but be persistent because that is a service that they offer. And even though they get busy, they will test your pressure canner for you. So that is tip number 1. So tip number 2, gather your supplies. So we need all the things when we can, right? So I have different funnels, different size funnels, different material funnels. I have plastic funnels. I have metal funnels. I have big ones. I have small ones. So gather all those up together. Same with your ladles. We may be using a different ladle for different types of products. I know when I do tomatoes, I have a slotted ladle, I guess you would call it, so that the water drains out when you're dipping your tomatoes to remove those tomato skins. You'll need to check for your jar rack, which is what goes down inside both a pressure canner as well as a water bath canner, your lid lifter, the little magnetic thing, a debubbler. So for many years I couldn't find my debubbler. I actually have 2 of them now. So that brings me to another point before we finish covering supplies. A really good way not to have that happen is store all of your canning supplies, your utensils, inside your canners. That's a great way that they don't get pushed to the back of the cabinet because they're not getting used during winter months. So, oh, and your jar lifter. That would be the last one. So, tip number 2. Tip number 3, organize and inventory your canning jars. So I don't know if y'all are like me, but as I use jars, I wash them, and I've shared before, I store all of my canners and canning supplies are out in my garage, so everything has to be thoroughly washed each and every time I use it. I try to save my original boxes and put quart jars back in quart jar boxes, pints, etc., back in pints, jellies, and jellies. So it's pretty easy for me to inventory, but if your situation is you're not keeping empty jars in order by size, you want to do that first. Now, I know we have some issue this year, not so much with canning jars. Those are available in flats. The issue has been more rings and lids, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. One of the things that you want to do as you're inventorying your jars is to check, and I'm just going to reach for a jar here. Obviously, this is rhubarb jam. And just pretend this is empty. You want to run your finger around the top edge. So if there are irregularities, chips, cracks, whatever you want to call them, your jar won't seal properly. So you'll want to find another use around your household. Or, you know what I use them for sometimes when I get a little chip is I will put the seed packet inside the jar, turn it upside down, and mark my garden rows with it. So that works well too. Or you can simply put them in your recycling bin if that's a better use for you. So let's move on to tip number 4. Tip number 4, buy lids and rings. Y'all may be saying, well, I would love to, but there aren't any in my area. So I'll tell you what I'm seeing in my area of Ohio. Primarily what is available is the 1 dozen box, whether it is a Ball brand or a Golden Harvest brand from Dollar General. Generally, you have to buy the lids and the rings together, which makes it a little more costly. I'm also seeing now that even the 12 box of rings and lids are out of stock, and you have to buy a whole new flat of jars, which may not be practical. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. Look at stores you wouldn't normally think of. Hardware stores, some of them have a wonderful stock because people are going to the Walmarts of the world and they're just empty. I know I check every single week when I go to Walmart, and there has not been any lids or rings for probably close to 2 months. So thankfully, I stocked up ahead of time, and I will also share any jam jelly that I plan to do. I will be using the Golden Harvest brand, which actually in my area you can buy either at a dollar store or, and I have trouble with this word, guys, Rural King. They have it as well. So think outside the box, check your local mom and pop's stores, check farmers markets. You might be surprised where you can actually find lids and rings. So make sure that you have plenty for what you plan to can, as well as enough for any seal failures where you're going to be reprocessing something. Tip number 5, review your recipes. And I'm going to do another video about how I inventory my leftover, if you will, canning that is still on the shelf and plan for what I'm going to do. And hopefully that will kind of push you in the right direction for how you might plan. But do take a look online, because it seems like every year they change things just a little bit. Ball will come out every single year with the new home preservation book, but I will put in the description box below the National Center for Home Food Preservation website link. Any recipe on there is considered safe and approved. A word of caution, guys. Sometimes when I peruse those online sites, I get a little sidetracked and I end up making a lot of things that I might not really need to make that year. So we've had some things like tomato jam with raisins. Yeah, I made peach salsa, which was actually very, very good. So just rein yourself in a little bit, focus on the things you know you want to make. And then if you know you're going to have an abundance, let's say, I'll just make something up, peaches, you may want to go look at recipes that involve peaches. So my final tip for preparing for your canning season is to inventory your ingredients. Now, y'all know what you generally can if you're a longtime canner. If you are not, that's where step 5, checking recipes, becomes very important. Staples that I always keep on hand are 5% acidity white vinegar, 5% acidity cider vinegar, citric acid, canning salt or non-iodized salt like pink Himalayan salt, sugar. I will generally, if it's a heavy jam canning year or a heavy fruit filling year, I buy my sugar in 25-pound bags. I repackage it into half-gallon jars, and then I vacuum seal them and date them. And that keeps the amount of sugar out in my canister at a very manageable level, but I always have some to fall back on. I know that sounds like a lot of sugar, but jam takes tons of sugar, as does pie filling. Pectin. So if you're going to make jams or jellies or pie filling, do you need powdered pectin, liquid pectin, or the special pectin to make pie filling with, which is a starchy type pectin. Pickling spices. So if you are going to pickle anything, and that doesn't mean just pickles, if you're going to pickle beets or pickle other vegetables, you'll need to make sure you have those pickling spices on hand. And then the final thing is the bottled lemon juice. That is called for in so many recipes, and so I just buy the great big bottles of lemon juice from Walmart, and they work fine in canning. Well, I hope this 6-item checklist has been helpful for you, put you at ease that you are indeed ready to start your canning season. I'm actually filming this on June 22nd, so I have been canning through the winter months on a very small scale, but I'm getting ready to gear up and really do some tomato canning. I have ordered from Piper 10 pounds of cherries, which will be ready around the 1st of July. So it's time for me to get busy on my checklist and check my canning supplies. So stay tuned for additional small videos about preparing for the canning season, how to inventory and maintain, and know how much you should be canning. So as always, be healthy, be well, be blessed, and I will see you all very soon with part 2. Take care.